Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, April 9th, 2017, and this is your fun fact of the day. Last week we went over the topic of creation in our new stretch of topics in Bible Fact Sundays, where we're going to be talking about all those Bible stories that you've heard of, most people have heard of, but don't actually really know where they are in the Bible. Not everybody has the entire Bible memorized. It's understandable. Last week we went over the creation story where God worked for 6 days and rested for the seventh. Today we're going to delve a little further into that sixth day where he created humans specifically. God formed a man, really a farmer, later called Adam, formed him from the dust of the ground and used his own, God's own breath to breathe life into him. So not only can God create living beings and expanses and oceans and stars, but he can also create unique, intelligent life. God made Adam a nice little garden called Eden. Like I said, God made a farmer. His instructions to Adam were to tend this garden, rule over the earth as far as all the livestock and animals, and subdue all those animals in the earth, and to not eat from one of the trees. More on that in just a minute. Adam followed God's instructions and watched him work the garden and rule over the animals. And while Adam was working, God realized he's alone. This might not be the best thing. Specifically, it said no suitable helper was found for Adam from any of the previous created animals that God had made. So God causes Adam to fall into a deep sleep. God removes one of Adam's ribs and forms a new being out of it. Calls it woman. Later she would be called Eve. A very interesting verse takes us a little bit out of this human creation story to point out that when a man gets married, he will leave his father and mother, cleave, join to his wife. Cleave usually meaning split, but it can also mean the opposite, where you cleave together and become one flesh. It's used to point out a special kinship between the husband and a wife that is unique and special. Now we know God created Adam and Eve, which we know they don't have human parents, which also raises the completely irrelevant question of, did they have belly buttons? We'll never know. Back at the story, however, God brings the woman to man, and finally man is happy. He says, "This at last is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones," recognizing that Eve is a suitable companion for himself. And at this time, both the man and the woman were naked and unashamed of it. At this point, in chapter 3, it's generally agreed upon that the sixth day has ended and we move forward in time to a different time after Adam and Eve have been tending the garden for some time now. And this brings us to the topic of today's story, which is the fall. Serpent approaches the woman, asks if God really told them that they shouldn't eat from that tree in the center of the garden, the one I mentioned earlier. Eve says they aren't allowed to even touch the tree or they'll die. Eve says they should have nothing to do with it, really. She just implies this is God's instruction, so we just don't even bother with it. We don't even get close to it. And the serpent does some very crafty things. Did God really say, touch it and you'll die? Really, it's a horrifically clever thing to simply call doubt into the simplest of instructions. The serpent then makes the claim that if they did eat the fruit of that tree, that Adam and Eve would not die, but become like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. Eve succumbs to his logic, eats some of the fruit, shares it with her husband, Adam. He also eats some of the fruit. At this point, their eyes are then opened and they realize they're naked. They make fig leaf aprons for themselves to cover up their nakedness. Eventually, God comes strolling through the garden. Adam and Eve hide themselves, knowing that he's coming and knowing they have disobeyed him, like any children of any parent would. They tend to not just come forward outright and say, yes, we did a goof. We're sorry. They hide, and God calls for them. He doesn't need to. He already knows what's going on. God asks Adam what has happened. Adam does not take her responsibility, immediately blame shifts to his wife. Eve says, well, it wasn't my idea, the serpent told me to do it. So not only do we have a lack of responsibility, a lack of owning up for what they did wrong, they also have blame shifting on both accounts here. For this is called the fall of man, where we fell from God's perfect grace into what would become a cursed world. God curses the snake, that it would crawl on its belly, eat dust. Enmity would be between him, the serpent, and all of humankind, really. Eventually, the serpent would bruise a human, or humans' heels, but the human would bruise his head. God curses the woman with painful menstrual cycles, pain in childbirth, and a desire to, depending on your interpretation, usurp her husband's authority, to not have him lead, but rather desire to have his position of leadership. God curses the men, saying, great job. She's not going to be a great submitter to your authority, and you get to work the fields, hard, sweaty, painful labor for the rest of your life. And guess what? Thorns. Thorns and poor yields are in store for you forever. So if you ever wonder why it sucks to be a farmer, you can blame Adam and Eve for not following God's instructions through the temptation of the serpent. This is referred to as the fall. Genesis chapters 2, 3, and 4. Mostly chapter 3, 2, and 4 just give you a good amount of setup and a good amount of denouement, which is just everything that happens afterwards. In other news, there's National Cherish and Antique Day. National Cherish Day. Good. Hold fast to what you appreciate. don't hold too closely to it. There are things greater than those, almost certainly. Additionally, National Antique Day, holding fast to what's historical, has some value to it. Those who don't know history are bound to repeat it, so I feel like that works along with the don't reinvent the wheel. Also, formal POW Recognition Day. So if you know anybody who's a veteran, thank them as well. But if you know anybody who is a POW, thank them specifically for all the bits they suffered during their time of imprisonment. And National Winston Churchill Day. Be English and smoke a cigar in his memory? It's up to you, I guess. Hope you've enjoyed this fun fact of the day. See you tomorrow.